Okay, thanks. Welcome back. So certainly it will be one of your last chance to ask me any question that you may have on what I said, right? Or point to me any mistake that I've done during those lectures. So there were long things that I didn't have time to cover yesterday. We'll try to catch up a little bit today. I will start by discussing a few things about the Higgs coupling, so probably complementing what Lian Tao told you. I will also tell you why it's not always a good idea to put h bar equal to 1, right? Because h bar has a dimension, and this will be very helpful to guess actually what is the power counting of various dynamics, UV dynamics for physics beyond the standard model, right? And then finally, I will tell you what I was supposed to tell you yesterday about the triviality, stability, and hierarchy of the Higgs potential. And there will be a final homework, which is a question that you can think about for the next 40 years, right? Good. So about Higgs primaries, right? So we have seen already that in the standard model, the Higgs coupling are totally fixed. There is no freedom. You know, there were only one unknown parameter that was the mass of the Higgs, and this has been measured now. So in the standard model, all the couplings are known, right? But what we are interested in is, of course, some possible deformation from physics beyond the standard model. And of course, nobody exactly knows what physics beyond standard model is. You know, it can take plenty of forms, and hopefully some of you will discover what it is in nature, right? Nonetheless, there is one kind of tools that we can use, is assume that this new physics is heavy enough, that you will integrate out those heavy degrees of freedom and just look at their effect on the standard model particles, right? So what I want to say is that here we'll basically parameterize all these new physics degrees of freedom in terms of higher dimensional interaction for the standard model Lagrangian. So the first things to write is probably all the possible dimension 6 operator that you can write out of the standard model particles, right? So you want to write a Lagrangian, which is standard model Lagrangian, yeah? Plus a bunch of dimension 6 operators, right? So there have been a long discussion about the classification of those operators, etc. Many of them have already been constrained experimentally. There is electric precision data, there is flavor data, there's plenty of things. The question now is actually what are the possible deformations that really affect Higgs physics, and deformation that were not constrained before the Higgs has been observed, right? So that's new class of deformation of the standard model that are constrained only by doing Higgs physics, right? And there are various of those operators. I've already discussed some of them yesterday. When we were discussing the Higgs low energy theorem, I told you that you have this contact interaction with the Higgs and two photons. So we know that this operator, for instance, is generated by integrating out the top quark, right? When you are looking at physics below the top mass, you can really integrate out the top and write everything in terms of a contact interaction, right? So for the top, this comes with an operator of dimension 6 suppressed by the weak scale, which is associated by the mass of the top, right? So now if you have new physics with new degrees of freedom, you expect, let's say, that this dimension 6 operator will be suppressed by the scale of new physics, lambda squared. It will come with g strong squared, and also maybe you can write 16 pi squared for some reason that are kind of obvious because it will be a one loop diagram, right? So now what I want to say is that this operator, for instance, is an operator that is constrained only in Higgs physics, right? You could say, okay, it will also affect the gluon, right? If I put the Higgs field to its the Higgs doublet to its vacuum expectation value, it modified the gluon propagator, right? But this is actually not quite true, right? If you remember what we said yesterday, you can always normalize the gluon in such a way that the kinetic term for the gluon in the standard model is something like that, right? So what is the effect of this operator in the vacuum when we replace the Higgs doublet by expectation value? Well, its effect is simply to modify this QCD gauge coupling, right? It will be, I don't know, Rn over lambda squared, right? I dropped all the numerical factor in front of it. So this means that in this theory, right, what you interpret as 1 over G strong is actually this combination, right? But of course, I mean, this is just a rescaling, or if you want to, just a redefinition of your input parameter of the standard model. What you will measure is this combination, and that you will never be able to make the distinction whether it's really this plus this, or whether actually it's only the combination that occurs in the standard model. Right? The only thing that you measure is the QCD gauge coupling, and then it's up to you to interpret the way you want. Right? But there is no way to see that there is new physics by doing QCD measurement. Is it clear? So this means that really this is one example of an operator that you will be sensitive to only if you're able to actually see the physical Higgs boson. If you replace the Higgs doublet by its vacuum expectation value, there won't be any trace of this operator in any observable. Just a redefinition of the input parameter of the standard model Lagrangian. Right? And this is one example of a primary, X primary. So X primary is just a deformation of, of the standard model, which is visible only in X physics. Right? And we have said yesterday that this operator, of course, is visible in X physics. So it affects the X production by fusion of gluon. It affects the decays of the X into two gluons. Right? So that's one really example of X primary. So how many X primary exist at the level of dimension 6? Well, the answer is quite simple, right? There are as many X primaries as there are input parameter in the standard model. To each of the input parameter of the standard model, you can always associate an operator of this type that will just shift the input parameter and will have no physical consequences in the vacuum. Is it clear? So how many input parameters exist in the standard model? 18, yeah. Well. Yeah, I will simplify it a little bit my life. I will do the counting, assuming that there is a single family of quark and leptons, because for X physics, at the end of the day, what matters is only the third family. Right? The coupling to the light quark, the lepton are basically irrelevant. Right? The light lepton, of course. Now we have the coupling of the X to tau. Right? So how many parameters? So there is certainly the gauge coupling, G, G prime, and G strong, right? The free gauge coupling. There is a mass of the physical mass of the Higgs boson. There is a mass of the Z, which is also related to the mass of the W by custodial symmetry. And there are the masses of the three different type of lepton, right? Three different type of fermions. So there is the up, mass of the up, mass of the bottom, and the mass of the tau, right? And this is equal to 8, right? So there are 8 input parameter, let's say, for the standard model with a single family, right? So this means that you do expect actually 8 X primary operators. So that's really 8 ways to deform the coupling of the X coupling that are totally unconstrained if you don't do X physics, right? Okay? So of course you can write explicitly those operators. So for instance, I mean, here G strong is associated to this one, H squared, G mu nu squared. What is the mass of the X? The parameter affecting the mass of the X is H to the 6. What is the operator that is affecting the mass of the top is H squared, the Yukawa, Q, H, complex conjugate, top, sorry. Same thing for the bottom is H squared, Q, H, bottom. Tau is the same thing, H squared, the left-handed doublet of the lepton times H times tau right. What are the other parameters? Now I'm going to screw it up probably. So this should be something like H squared, W mu nu A squared. There is also H squared, B mu nu squared. And what is the one that I'm missing? Yes, the one that we have already discussed slightly yesterday, which is H squared, D mu H squared, right? So that's really the list of the 8 primaries operator, and is not an accident actually that this counting, these 8 and deformation actually correspond more or less to the counting that Lian Tao discussed in the previous lecture, which is a kappa parameter, right? Actually, if you do the proper counting, there is 8 kappa parameters that are constrained only in X physics. Some of the, I don't know exactly the counting because I skip his lecture, but I don't know how many he introduced, but there is 8 that are unconstrained. If he introduced more than 8, it means that some of them were actually constrained, let's say, by electric precision data. You know, sometimes people introducing kappa V, or kappa W and kappa Z, but actually the ratio kappa W divided by kappa Z is actually constrained by electric precision measurement because this is a measure of the breaking of custodial symmetry, right? So something which is heavily constrained by Z-pole measurement at LEP, right? So there is really only 8 kappa parameters that are somehow unconstrained beyond X physics, right? So what is the situation, the experimental situation? So how do we know about these 8 parameters now that we have done accumulated X data? Well, actually, out of these 8, there is at least 5 that are really well constrained, let's say well constrained within 10, 15, 20%. And there are still 2 or 3, depending the way you want to count, there are 2 or 3 that remains unconstrained at the moment. So one which is obvious, which is, let's say, this one, the one related to the h to the 6th power, because for that you need to measure the X self-interaction, right? And you need basically to produce 2 X bosons at the same time, so you need to look at double X production. And if you apply the rules, the counting rules that Lian Tao told you, the production for double X is actually 3 orders of magnitude smaller than the production for single X, right? So this is very rare event, and you really need to accumulate a lot of statistics, a lot of luminosity to be able to have access to this coupling, to this particular process. Another difficult process is related to another rare decay of the X, which is the X decay into a Z and a photon. This is still on the agenda of the Run 2 on high luminosity LHC to really put a strong bound on this process. And this should be related, I think, to this operator, if I'm not wrong. Or maybe some of these. I mean, a linear combination, I don't remember now on top of my head. A linear combination of those operators. And this will come. So these are the 2, let's say, 2 primaries that we need to accumulate more data to say anything upon. And there is one third linear combination, actually, of those primaries that we have no real clue about, which is a combination, actually, of the contact interaction to gluon and the modified top-Yukawa coupling. So this combination, these 2, right, is actually the linear, it's a linear combination which is affecting the gluon fusion production. So the cross-section of glue goes to X is actually proportional to, let's say, the modified contact interaction to gluons plus a modified top-Yukawa coupling. Right? It's simply because at the end of the day, this process is just a contact interaction, let's say, to the X. So this is kappa G. And you can also proceed like in the standard model with a loop of top quark, right? And this is kappa T, right? And at the end of the day, if you normalize your things correctly, this is simply proportional to the squared of this element, of this linear combination, the squared of this sum, right? So we have measured this production cross-section. So we have a bound on the sum of the 2, but we have no direct access of the individual coupling. So we still don't know actually what is the value of the top-Yukawa coupling. One way to access to this coupling alone will be to look at the production of the X in association with 2 top quark. Like in this diagram, these diagrams here. So top, which is emitting a X, right? So this association production of the X with 2 top quark is indeed sensitive only to the modified top-Yukawa coupling. But actually, this is a process, again, which is difficult. The rate is small. The finite state is quite complicated. You have 2 top that decays into WB. So it's very busy finite state. There is a huge background. And we don't have any real good measurement of this process yet. So this means that at the moment, if you try to put the bound individually on the top Yukawa coupling, the bound is very weak. Right? Is basically a 4-to-1, right? We can still allow some deviation of 4-to-1 in the top Yukawa coupling, provided that you introduce a deformation in a correlated way with a contact interaction with a gluon, right? So one way to introduce this deformation, for instance, will be to introduce some vector-like top quark, so a massive top quark, a partner which is fermionic. So and you have a mixing with this top prime and the top. So you have a top prime that can run into the loop, right? So you will generate this contact interaction by shrinking, by taking the limit of infinite top prime mass. So you will certainly introduce this coupling. You will also, by mixing with the top, you will introduce a deformation of the top Yukawa coupling. So you will generate those two deformations, here and here. And actually, depending a little bit on the symmetry of your model, those two deformations are precisely along this flat direction. Right? So if you have a top prime, depending on the quantum number of this top prime, such a way that it can mix with the top, actually you end up exactly on this nasty flat direction that is not constrained experimentally. So it's really funny, right? Maybe there is new physics. This new physics is affecting the X coupling, but you don't see this new physics when you're looking only at inclusive quantity. Right? If you're looking only at the total X production by fusion of gluon, you don't see this new physics. It's just hidden. So to see it, either you have to look at TT bar H associated production, or the other thing that you can look at is actually at additional radiation in this process. So for instance, you can look at a gluon fusion production with the X in association with an extra jet. So in this case, you are somehow opening the loop. So you are trying to see really what is going on inside the loop. So you can see really whether there is new particle running into the loop. Right? So you can look at the distribution, the PT distribution of this extra jet. And this actually, if you look at the cross section imposing a cut on the PT of this extra jet, you can see actually that you are breaking this linear degeneracy there. So that's one way to resolve this X coupling measurement. Okay? Good. No, I mean, okay. So here, good question. So here I've done the counting for the CP even X coupling. You can repeat the same stories. There is about five primaries direction affecting the CP odd coupling of the X, which are 0 in the standard model. The only thing is that those ones are more difficult to access simply because there is no interference with the standard model, at least when you're looking at inclusive quantity. While here, all those operators interfere with the standard model. So you are really sensitive, let's say, at the linear order to those deformations. For the CP odd, you are only sensitive to the quadratic piece. And then, okay, if the deformation is small, the quadratic piece is much suppressed compared to the linear piece, and then you are dead, basically. But there are strong indirect constraints, actually, coming from EDMs. I mean, the EDM of the particle put some bounds on this tough CP violating couplings. Right? Okay, good. So, so now you are all familiar with these higher dimensional operators, right? So you are doing EFTs, effective field theory, and effective field theory is just a way to parameterize our ignorance of physics beyond the standard model. Right? You don't know exactly about the structure of this new physics. You don't know what new particle exists. You just try to capture really the effect on the possible thing that you can observe at low energy. Right? So now what I want to tell you is actually some rules to actually count exactly or try to understand what are the possible effects and the size of those possible effects in a very generic way, right? So we'll assume for simplicity that my new physics is characterized by a single scale and a single coupling. Right? If you have new physics, there is a scale, I mean the scale of this new particle, and you also need a coupling because you need to know how those new particles couple to the standard model degrees of freedom. So you need two parameters to really describe new physics, at least two, right? In concrete example, it can be many more parameters, but at least you need two. Right? So you need to introduce a mass scale, m star, and a coupling G star. And sometimes I'm also replacing this scale by the product of G star times F, right? Exactly like when you're doing QCD, you're writing the mass as G rho times F pi, right? So it's exactly the equivalent. That's or the mass of the W is the couplings times the wave of the X, right? So now what I want to say is actually I want to try to estimate, the coefficient of all these dimension 6 operators that I wrote before, and also the other that are affecting, let's say, electric precision data. I want to try to estimate the size of those coefficients in terms of those two parameters of new physics, right? And for that, you simply need to use actually what you doing all the time. You need to use dimensional analysis, right? So you know that those operators that have started to write, are dimension 6 operators, so they need to be suppressed by a mass scale squared, right? Okay. So for instance, if I start, let's say, with this operator, d mu h squared, so it's dimension 6. So it will be suppressed by the mass scale of these new particles, right? Now what I'm missing is what is the dependence on the coupling of new physics. That's more problematic, right? Because the coupling is dimensionless number, right? What is the electric charge? The electric charge in the standard model is, you remember, right? You knew that last time. 0.3, yes. Value of G in the standard model, G and G prime. Yeah, 0.6, 0.3. G is 0.6, G prime is 0.3, approximately. Okay, so how do you know exactly which power of G, G prime, G star should you put here? Right? They are dimensionless number, right? Well, actually the electric charge is not a dimensionless number, right? You remember these funny units of the electric charge? I never remember. But it's not a dimensionless number. So this means that you cannot put arbitrary power of the electric charge or whatever is arbitrary power of the coupling in those operators. The gauge coupling and all the coupling are dimensionless only when you are working in natural units, right? When you are working in units that we all know and love, is h bar is equal to c is equal to 1. But physically h bar is not equal to 1. H bar as a unit, right? So sometimes it's very important to remember that h bar has actually a dimension. It's a dimension-full quantity. And then you can really try to estimate what are the power that comes in front of all these operators simply by looking at the h bar dimension. You need to make sure that the Lagrangian or your action has the right h bar dimension. And that's all the rules that you need to know, right? Once you have to remember, you want to count the mass dimension and the h bar dimension, and you will figure it out exactly what is the dependence on the coupling. Okay? So let us do that very quickly. So what is the h bar dimension of the Lagrangian? Oh, okay. That you don't know. You know? 0? No. Yes. Well, yeah. Okay. Why? So when you're computing a process, it's always the exponential of the action divided by h bar, right? I mean, we're doing quantum mechanics is an expansion in h bar, right? So the action has a power of h bar. The action, whatever, is just the integral d for x of the Lagrangian, right? So here we'll skip some step. I mean, at the end of the day, if you keep h bar different than 1, I mean, there are basically 2 units that you can use. So, I mean, usually when you put h bar equals c equal 1, you are treating everything in unit of a mass, right? I mean, all the dimension that you have is mass. Now that I don't want to put h bar equal 1, I will have to introduce a second unit, right? And in practice, it's very useful to work with 2 dimension full quantity, which are the dimension of a length and the dimension of h bar. But actually, the dimension of the length is related to the mass dimension, so that you know how to compute. There is no issue here. So now what I want to say is simply to compute the h bar dimension, and you're right to say that at the end of the day, the h bar dimension of the Lagrangian should be equal to 1. Right? Okay, we count h bar This is 1, right? So now what is the Lagrangian? So now I want to find the h-bar dimension of all the fields on all the couplings, right? So for instance, if you take a scalar field, it will be d mu phi squared, right? So the h-bar dimension has to be equal to 1. So this is telling you that the h-bar dimension of a scalar field is equal to 1/2, right? Okay. The h-bar dimension of, let's say, a spinor, of a fermion, is psi bar psi. So again, the dimension of a fermion is 1/2. A gauge field is f mu nu squared, right? F mu nu is d mu a mu minus d nu a mu. So again, the h-bar dimension of a gauge field is equal to 1/2. Okay, good. We are making progress. So what is the h-bar dimension of the coupling now, of the gauge coupling? Well, f mu nu, right? Now you need to look at the covariant derivative. F mu nu is d mu a nu minus d nu a mu plus g a mu a nu, right? So this is h-bar dimension 1/2. This is h-bar dimension 1. So the gauge coupling is h-bar dimension minus 1/2. Right? What about the Yukawa interaction? The Yukawa interaction, you know, it's Yukawa times what? 2 fermions. Okay, Q bar H top, let's say. So again, this has dimension h bar equal 1, right? So this is 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 3/2. So h psi is equal, the Yukawa is minus 1/2 again. Something which is maybe less trivial. What about the X self-interaction, this lambda that you're writing in the X potential? Okay? So you want the potential to be lambda, let's say h to the 4, right, or phi to the 4th, right? So this is h bar dimension 2. So lambda has h bar dimension which is minus 1, right? That's something that, you know, maybe will tell you, I mean, will help you to understand exactly the shape of the X potential in the MSSM, for instance. You know, in the MSSM, the X potential is not a free parameter. The mass of the X is fixed, right? It's fixed by the gauge coupling in particular. And if you remember, basically, I mean, you have some quartic coupling in the MSSM X potential, and the quartic coupling is related to the gauge coupling squared, right? Right. Why? I mean, how do you understand this squared? Well, okay, you understand the square by, you know, looking at the algebra of SUSY, etc. But this is just h bar dimension, right? Lambda has the same dimension of the squared of the gauge coupling, right? What else? Yeah, another important thing, you know, we are always using or saying that V, the wave of the X, is 246 GeV, or 174 GeV if you're perverse and use the square root of 2 in the normalization, right? But V has not the mass dimension of a mass. I mean, V is the inverse of a coupling, right? Because the mass, well, because the mass of the W is G times V, 1/2, G times V, right? And this, okay, the h bar dimension of M of the mass, that's the piece that I haven't explained to you, but this has h bar dimension 0, this has h bar dimension 1 minus 1/2. So the wave of the X has a h bar dimension which is not 0. Right? So effectively, V is the inverse of a coupling. And that also should help you understand, you know, when we have when you have computed WW scattering yesterday or the day before, I don't remember, we found a scattering amplitude that was S divided by V, right? And I told you, well, you can compute that in the gaugeless limit. You turn off the gauge coupling. I compute it by looking, you know, switching off all the gauge interaction, just looking at the interaction of the pion. But then there is no coupling anymore. Well, there is a coupling because V is the inverse of a coupling, right? And to have a scattering amplitude, you need a coupling. Right? So that's why the result here remains finite, even if you send the gauge coupling to 0, because you still have the coupling. V is a coupling V is measure the coupling of the Goldstone bosons. Right. So now everything is getting clear. Right? H bar dimension. Okay. So now we are ready to actually complete our exercise and find indeed the power of the coupling that you need to add to all these dimension 6 operator, right? So the Lagrangian need to be H bar dimension equal 1. So here I have 4 power of the field, so H bar is equal to 2. So you need to add 2 power of the coupling to make this dimension 6 operator of H bar dimension equal to 1, right? So here I should write G star squared, right? So this is where basically model dependence occurs, right? I mean, is it really G star? Could it be, I don't know, the coupling of the standard model, right? I mean, maybe new physics will couple with standard model coupling to the standard model degrees of freedom, and maybe there is G. Well, that's exactly where, you need to make assumption about the UV dynamics. Different UV dynamics give you different effective field theory, different power counting, right? That's the selection rules, right? Some operators are generated by new physics only, some other operators are generated by standard model interaction. For that, I mean, you can classify, you can have broad class of UV dynamics according to the power counting, but power counting is never model independent. You need to make assumption about your UV dynamics, right? Okay, so that was an easy operator. So usually when you're looking, for instance, at H to the 6 operator, right? So again, is H bar dimension equal to 3, right? Yes. Okay. Okay. Good.
So when you have said that the RGs for the UCAL is just like moving the standard model, you often have like a dy du term on the left-hand side, and you have like a UCAL cube term on the right-hand side. How is that consistent with this counter of H bar?
Well, first of all, it's one loop. It's a one-loop expansion, so I mean it goes to the H bar dimension equal to 2. Right? When I say that the Lagrangian is H bar equal 1, I mean this is somehow the tree-level Lagrangian. Then you have a one loop times the Lagrangian generated at one loop. So in this case, I mean the one loop Lagrangian will be H bar dimension equal to 2, right? Just to have the expansion in H bar. So I mean we can look explicitly at this RG equation, but I mean there is a way to to make it consistent, obviously. Right? So H to the 6, so it's H bar dimension 3. So I need, in principle, to add 4 power of the gauge of the coupling, or you can have lambda times G star squared, right? Again, it's divided by M star squared, right? So there again, it depends a little bit on the dynamics that will generate your X potential. Right? There will be some dynamics that will give you G star to the 4. There will be other dynamics, that will tell you that the X coupling will remain 0. If you have no breaking. So in order to generate these higher dimensional operators, you need one insertion of the standard model coupling, right? So that's really selection rules, right? The dynamics will fix you which power you should include in these operators. So let's come back now, maybe a little bit less trivial, indeed, to the contact interaction with the gluon, right? G mu nu squared. So this is H bar dimension equal to 2. Okay, so 1 over. And by minimal coupling, I mean every time you have a gauge coupling, you also need to introduce the gauge coupling associated to it. So certainly it has to be proportional to G squared. So in principle, I mean the H bar dimension is correct, right? I mean you don't need to add anything. Okay, maybe I'll do the discussion with a photon. It will be easier to understand. F mu nu, G or E squared, right? So now you should ask yourself whether new physics can generate this operator at tree level by just the exchange of a particle, or can it generate it at the loop level only? And this affects the H bar dimension, right? Tree level operator is H bar dimension 1. If it's loop, it's H bar equal 2, right? Because you need one loop factor. Well, the answer is simple here, right? I mean, here it's a contact interaction between photon and X, so it's a contact interaction among electrically neutral object. And you know that the photon couples only to electrically charged particle. So this means that there is no way to generate this operator at tree level. Right? You cannot attach two X field with a neutral, electrically neutral particle here. I don't know what it is. Two photons. There is not such a coupling. You need electrically charged particle to couple to the photon. So this means that here you need at least a loop of electrically charged particle. Right? So here this operator will be generated at the loop level. So there will be an extra factor G star squared divided by 16 pi squared. Right? And again, then you end up with an operator of h bar dimension equal to 2, as you expect, because it's generated at the loop level. Okay? Good. Yes?
Sometimes when you're integrating out some freedoms, like integrating out the top fermion, when you're going from one loop to three loop, do you look this additional h bar?
So you're asking about the top, but the top, I mean, if you remember the expression that we have found yesterday, it was alpha squared divided by 16 pi squared v squared, right? No, what was it? I don't have my notes of yesterday. Should have been something like that, no? And so what is this? This should work. Okay, maybe we'll come back to that in a moment, but I think it works. It should work. So you have 4 power, so it's so I'm losing I'm losing some. Okay, we'll think about it. It will be an exercise for you. Okay. So that's exactly what is happening in particular if G star, so that will be the Lagrangian, for instance, of a composite X model. So in composite X model, you expect new physics which is strongly coupled. So this means that G star is actually a large number, right? And that makes a big difference, whether, for instance, like those operators is suppressed by 1 over f squared. And there are other operators like the one that I haven't written. For instance, it will be h d mu h, like this, times, I don't know, d mu b mu nu, right? This operator, for instance. What is the scaling of this operator? So, okay, it comes with G prime, because there is one gauge field. Now you count the h bar dimension is 1, 2, 3, so 3 times 1/2, and then minus 1/2, so its h bar dimension is equal to 1, right? So you expect that this operator is suppressed by 1 over m star squared. And this is 1 over f squared. And of course, if G star is large, you have f which is much smaller than m star, right? So this means that this is a dominant operator. This one is further suppressed compared to those ones, right? So for composite X model or strongly interacting theory, for instance, G star is equal to 1. There is only a subset of those dimension 6 operators which are dominant, which are the ones which are suppressed by 1 over f, or 1 over f squared, not 1 over m star squared. That's a big difference, right? You have to pay a price here for those operators because, you don't have G star, any power of G star, right? Okay? So you can understand, by simply making a simple assumption about the UV dynamics, only assuming that you have strong interaction, you can understand that there is only a finite subset of deformation of the standard model that plays an important role in modifying the physics of the Higgs boson. Another example, maybe along this line, that some of you might be interested in, is a famous Higgs portal model, right? So you all know that we need dark matter in nature. And so we need the dark matter to couple to us. And one good mediator between the dark sector and us is the Higgs boson. So what does it mean in concrete terms? Well, it means, for instance, that you have a Lagrangian, that involve any dark sector. So for simplicity, I will assume that it's just a scalar field. And again, the scalar field will be characterized by one mass scale and one coupling. So this means that, for instance, I will have a term which is, I don't know, a mass term for this dark sector dark matter scalar. So m star squared, right? That's just a mass term. And now I need to introduce a coupling between the Higgs boson and my dark sector, right? So that's an operator which is invariant, right? Okay, assuming, for instance, that, I don't know, this is really a boring dark sector, you know, there is no charge, so I can write any single power, for instance, of an interaction between the Higgs and the scalar field, right? So what is the coefficient in front of this? Well, just by dimensional analysis, it should have a mass dimension equal to 1. There is free field, so it should be G star 1. And here we'll introduce an extra parameter, which is basically the amount of mixing that exists between the dark sector and the Higgs boson, right? Okay, so that will be my typical Lagrangian. So here you could also write something more general, a general potential term for your field. So it should be it should be a function of a dimensionless quantity in h bar and mass, right? And it should be m star to the 4, right? So that's the most general Lagrangian that you can write, for instance, for a dark scalar, right? Again, that involves one coupling and one scale, m star and g star. So now what will happen, for instance, if this dark sector is heavy, so you integrate out this dark sector, you will generate some higher dimensional operators for the Higgs boson, right? So can I simply quickly estimate again the coefficient of these operators? Yeah, very quickly, right? I mean, okay, so for instance, here what could you do, right? Integrating out means that you will replace the dark scalar by the equation of motion. So what is the equation of motion? Is m star phi is equal to theta g times m star times h squared, right? Right, okay. So now, what kind of effective interaction will I generate for the Higgs boson? Well, for instance, in the dark sector, I certainly have a kinetic term for my scalar field. So now I replace the scalar field by its expression here. So I will generate something which is what? Theta squared G star squared divided by m star squared, right? D mu h squared, right? Okay, that's exactly, I mean, what you could have guessed simply by using again h bar dimension, right? Look at the h bar dimension of things, you just add the right power of G star. So now the only things, I mean, the only characteristic of this dark sector model, dark portal model, is that all this higher dimensional expression that involves the X should come with theta, because this is a mixing between the dark sector and the visible sector, right? So what about h to the 6, right? H to the 6, you can generate it, for instance, phi cube, right? Phi cube. So what is the right dimension of phi cube? It should be m star, dimension 4 in mass, and it should be G star, yes, G star, right? Is the right mass dimension. So again, I mean, if you apply this rule and look at the cubic equation, you'll find something like that, right? So now this will come after integrating out this dark scalar. It will be G star, m star, phi cube, which is theta cube, G star cube, divided by m star cube times h to the 6, right? Right. Okay. So that's exactly one example of things that I was writing here. You know, it's one example where you actually know you have no selection rules, and the maximum deviation of the h to the 6 coupling will come actually with the fourth power of the coupling of new physics. Right? Okay. Good. So now you can also match. I mean. You could match, for instance, this description with the parametrization A, B, and C that I was introducing, I don't know, 2 days ago, I think. You can look exactly at how those higher dimensional operators will induce a shift of the X coupling to the W and the Z. So maybe I can do it very quickly on this operator, at least computing A from this operator. Right. What is the parameter A? So now write explicitly this operator. So H is 0 V plus the Higgs boson divided by square root of 2. So H squared is what? Is 1/2 V plus H squared, right? So what is this operator? So the operator here will be, so the Lagrangian is certainly 1/2 d mu H, which is the standard model kinetic term for the X, plus, let's say, okay, so now I will replace this by, okay, the coefficient CH divided by F squared, okay? That's the coefficient in front of this higher dimensional operators, the number for the one, right? CH is a number for the one. I will put the factor 2 by normalization, so CH divided by 2F squared. And then you have d mu of d, okay, so d mu of this is V plus H, d mu of V plus H squared, right? And now you see that in particular, this will contain a piece, okay, d mu of V is equal to 0, right? So it's d mu H, right? So in particular, if you pick this term, you'll have a correction to the kinetic term of the X, right? So this means that here, you, instead of having factor 1/2, you have 1/2 plus, actually, CH divided by F squared, CH V squared divided by F squared times d mu H squared, right? Yep. So this means, what does it mean? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, it's just a coefficient of order 1, right? I mean, so this you guess by dimension analysis, and then there is some number for the one that you cannot pick up by dimension analysis, right? That's the characteristic of the model. Okay? So, what does it mean? It means that in presence of this higher dimensional operator, the X field here, right, is not canonically normalized anymore. It's not a problem, right? I can define H tilde, which is simply the square root of 1 plus, yes, CH V squared of F squared times H, right? And then my Lagrangian will write as d mu 1/2 d mu H tilde squared, right? So this is a canonically normalized field. So this guy propagates as a usual scalar field, right? But what is the effect on the coupling? Well, here, if you look, right, I've written a single derivative because this is a gauge invariant object. So it's a single derivative. There is no gauge boson associated to this derivative here. So this means that I don't introduce any coupling between the gauge field and the X boson here. So all the interaction between the X and the gauge boson will come from the standard model Lagrangian. So this means that here, in particular, we'll have a term which is plus 1/2 the mass of the Z times 1 plus H over V squared times Z mu, right? The mass for the X. And this is the X, I mean, this is this X field, right? This is exactly the standard model Lagrangian. So now, okay, you expand, okay, the mass term is not modified. You get 1 plus, so 2H divided by V, right? Okay, plus quadratic piece that I don't care, right? I just want to look at the single vertex between 1 X and 2 gauge boson, right? So now you still need to replace the X in terms of the canonically normalized X field, right? So this means that here, instead of having the standard model coupling GHZZ, standard model, it will be actually proportional to 1 over square root of 1 plus CH V squared divided by F squared, right? That's the new coupling of the canonically normalized X to the Z gauge boson. And now, of course, you can expand, right? So this is, maybe I missed some factor 2, okay. G standard model coupling, okay. GHZZ, I mean, this was, what is it? Is mz squared divided by V, maybe a factor 2, I don't care, times 1 minus 1/2 CH V squared over F squared, right? And that's exactly the factor A that I had introduced before, right? So A is equal to 1 minus 1/2 CH V squared of F squared. Or if you want, is actually 1 over square root of 1 plus CH V squared of F squared. Okay? So I'll let you do the computation, I mean, for C, for B. For B is a little bit more tricky, actually, because, okay, B, if you remember, that was a quadratic coupling of 2 Higgs boson with 2 Z. And now you have to be a little bit more careful, because here, you know, I've done a redefinition which is only a linear redefinition. But here, you know, I had a piece, actually, which is non-standard. I have some interaction which is h squared d mu h squared. And you can actually reabsorb this non-standard piece into this form, but for that you need to actually define a nonlinear field redefinition. So there will be some coefficient here, plus h cubed, etc. So you need to perform a nonlinear field redefinition, and this will of course affect the nonlinear X coupling. So if you want to compute B, you need to look exactly at this field redefinition that will reabsorb this nonlinear interaction. And then at the end of the day you can compute it. I mean, it's trivial, right? Okay, that's it. So now I can go a little bit further, for instance, and very quickly describe what is going on in composite X model, for instance. So what is a composite X model? I will go very quickly. Again, you know, nobody exactly knows what could be a full UV dynamics of the composite X model, because it will be a strongly interacting theory. You cannot compute anything. But fortunately, you know, you can actually understand the coupling of the composite X just by looking at the symmetry again. So one good example of composite X, for instance, will be to extend simply the global symmetry of the standard model. We have discussed at length this custodial symmetry of the standard model. So the symmetry breaking pattern is SO4 broken to SO3, and this was producing 3 Goldstone bosons, right? Which are Z longitudinal, W plus and minus longitudinal, right? So now the idea of composite X, for instance, will be to simply extend or enlarge this group. So you go from SO4 to SO5, and you break it to SO4, right? So how many Goldstone do we expect here? So SO5 is of dimension 10, right? So you expect 10 minus 6, which is equal to 4, right? So in this case, you expect 4 Goldstone boson. You will end up with a 3 Goldstone boson of the standard model, plus 1 extra physical X boson that you want to interpret as X. Right? In this model, I do expect a 4 physical Goldstone boson, which is not eaten by the gauge symmetry. I mean, the gauge symmetry will remain exactly the one of the standard model. So nobody is eating this extra Goldstone boson, and this will become the physical X boson. Right? So that's one very concrete example, you know, where the X of the standard model emerge as a pseudo-Goldstone boson associated to the breaking of some global symmetry of a strong sector. Yeah, you need to break, I mean, exactly like, you know, at the end of the day in QCD, which is also this symmetry breaking pattern, you are giving a mass to the pion by, for instance, gauging U1F electromagnetism. Right? So what is electromagnetism? Electromagnetism is a subgroup of SO3. So the full global symmetry is actually breaking by, explicitly breaking, by gauging a subgroup. So here you can do the same, right? You are gauging a subgroup of SO4. You're gauging SU2 cross U1. So this will generate a mass. Actually, the story is a little bit more complicated. That was the homework number 6. That was a blank page, right? I didn't have time to write this exercise. It come out later, right? So you will be able to do this exercise, right, if you want, at some point. Yeah, so so what are the value of this parameter, for instance, CH, etc., all the parameters in this coset model? Well, again, you can compute it explicitly by the symmetry, right? Everything is dictated only by the symmetry. There is no freedom. That's why symmetry is so powerful. I mean, global symmetry are so powerful. I don't know, maybe Nima, later in the lecture in the school, will tell you that symmetry don't exist. Well, they don't exist for the global symmetry. Gauge symmetry are not symmetries, right? But global symmetries are always, or at least approximate symmetry of nature. Right? Okay. Yeah, so how can I describe this coset symmetry, this coset space? So SO5 broken to SO4, right? So you simply need to introduce a vector of SO5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 component. So that will be my sigma, right? That transform simply as G global symmetry, right? So maybe U times sigma. And then you are giving an expectation value of sigma, which is simply proportional to 0, 0, 1, right? 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. And then there is a mass scale F, right? So that's the only quantity that characterizes breaking is a symmetry breaking scale F, right? Okay? So that's all what you need to know. So now, of course, sigma is the exponential of the pion as usual. And now in the pion, I do have the longitudinal W and Z, but I also have this extra Goldstone boson, which is the X, right? And you can gauge, you can write an effective Lagrangian, which is something that we have already seen many times, d mu sigma, the trace, and then f squared divided by 2. And then what is d mu sigma is exactly, I mean, you need to know exactly how you want to embed SU2 cross U1 into SO5, because so far you know only how sigma transform into SO5. So you need to look a little bit, you know, at the generator of SO5, and SO5 contains SO4 clearly, and SO4 contains SU2 cross SU2. So one of the SU2 will be the gauge SU2, the other U1 will be a subgroup of this extra SU2. Right? So it's a little bit of group theory, but at the end of the day it's quite easy. And now if you introduce the Goldstone, so you can see that the X, I mean the exponential of whatever, the exponential of the pion, right? The pion that describes this breaking of SO5 over SO4, pion TA times V times 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. And at the end of the day, if you keep explicitly the X boson, it will be 0, I think, let me write it. Where do I put my X field here? Yes. It will be 0, 0 sine h over f, 0 cos h over f, right? So simply sine and cos, because you know they are the exponential of this rotation matrix, so exponential of something is actually the sine and the cosine, right? So if you do your group theory exercise properly, you will see really appearing this sine h over f, cosine h over f. Right? Here I say v, it should be f, of course, right? And now, okay, now you can take the derivative, etc. So this Lagrangian that is describing the physics of the Goldstone boson will be simply, at the end of the day, will be f squared, the mass, let's say the mass of the W plus W minus times sine squared h over f, right? It will contain at least something like that, right? So you remember that when we have done the standard model, I told you that when you take sigma equal 1, you recover the mass of the gauge boson. So now I'm looking at the interaction of the gauge boson with a pion, I mean the Goldstone boson, it will contain something like that. So what I want to say that now, you can actually do the matching between this effective Lagrangian and the one with higher dimensional operators very easily, right? How does it work? Well, you simply need to expand the X around its expectation value, right? So sine squared h over v over f is what? Is sine squared h over v plus derivative of sine is 2 sine h over f cos h over f, sine cos, yes, times delta, the fluctuation, right, above its expectation value, right? It's just expansion of this function, right? Is it clear? So these things will give you the mass of the W. So you know, sorry. Okay. So this will tell you that the mass of the W squared is equal to 1/2 F squared times sine squared, the sine squared of the expectation value of the X divided by V. Right? Probably there is some gauge coupling I forgot. Oh. Right. Okay, there is gauge coupling because it's covariant derivative clearly. Okay, so this you can really do the matching with what exists in the standard models. This is 1/2 G squared V squared, right? So you obtain that in this model V is actually F times sine expectation value of the X divided by V. Okay, I will write it down here. Right, I obtain that V, what I call V in the standard model, is actually F times sine H divided by F. Which time is it? 5. Okay. Good. Perfect. Okay, so what is the next term? So then it will be sine squared H over F times 1 plus 2 cos H over F divided by sine H over F times delta H over F plus etc. etc. So here, you obtain the linear interaction of, let's say, the Higgs boson, which is a fluctuation above its expectation value, with the W, right? So this is the coefficient A, right? The coefficient A that measures its linear interaction. Okay. So the Lagrangian is what? Is G squared, well, F squared sine squared H over F times 1 plus 2 cos H over F sine H over F delta H over F plus etc. times W mu plus W mu minus. Okay? So what is this quantity? Well, so F times sine H over F, this is just V, right? And what is cos? Cos H over F is equal to square root of 1 minus sine squared H over F. This is square root of 1 minus V squared over F squared, right? Okay. This is the microphone. So this is simply 1 minus V squared over F squared times delta H over F, right? So you obtain that in this model, A is simply 1 minus V squared over F squared, right? So if you match with the previous model, maybe up to a sign that I must have lost somewhere, you obtain that CH is equal to 1. That's the effective Lagrangian that describes this SO4 over SO5 over SO4 model. So you can continue. I mean, you can repeat and look at all the possible coupling. You will compute A, B, and C, etc. You will compute the full effective Lagrangian that will describe this SO4 over SO5 over SO4 composite X model. You don't know the UV dynamics. You only know the global symmetry property, and this is enough to really characterize all the possible interaction, all the physics that will be observed at the LHC. Yes? Well, the point is simply to get, an extra Goldstone boson, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm using the X as a Goldstone boson simply because I want to understand why I've observed one particular resonance of the strong sector, not the other. So why the pion are much lighter than, I don't know, the raw meson? Because the pion are ghost on boson, right? So here is exactly the same thing, right? Let's say having, a totally generic strong sector that will produce the X as a resonance, usually you will expect all the resonances as the same mass, right? But here, by assuming that the X is a pseudo-ghoston, I've been able to generate this mass gap, then being safe from the experimental point of view, right? Kind of safe, okay. Now we need to look at the details, but so now you can really study, all the X physics in this model. So you do expect some deviation compared to the standard model, but this deviation, are really not arbitrary variation, deformation. Those deformations are characterized by the symmetry structure of your models. And you can parameterize everything in terms of a single scale F, and there will be again a single coupling that will characterize the typical coupling of the strong sector, right? So here, I didn't introduce it, but it will appear naturally if you're looking at other interactions. Okay. So we have done primaries, we have done H-bar counting, EFTs, matching with various models. Now we can approach, let's say, some renormalization group evolution effect in the standard model X potential, right? Is there any question on all these things? This is BSM, but okay.
Where does X mechanism enter here? Because you have already...
Yes. Well, no, yeah, I need to explain how I generate this wave, right? So here and for that, you need basically to generate a potential for this ghost on boson. So this is exactly what he was asking. So the gauging will break the global symmetry. So it will generate a potential for the pseudo ghost on boson. You can write the generic potential, that satisfies those symmetry. That will be the exercise, the famous exercise number 6. Yes. Okay. But yeah, the point is that the strong dynamics here is not breaking electric symmetry. The strong dynamics simply produce a ghost on boson. And then there is usual X mechanism. So, you generate the potential for this pseudo ghost on boson, and this potential will break electric symmetry. So it's really a two-step process. The strong dynamic in itself doesn't break electric symmetry. This will be technicolor. In technicolor, you have strong dynamics. It breaks directly SU2 cross U1 down to U1. So here I start with a larger global symmetry. This spontaneous breaking of the global symmetry produces X, and then it's usual standard X mechanism. Standard, except that you have some coupling that don't correspond to the standard model coupling, characterized by another symmetry structure. Okay. So now it's time to come back to the standard model and maybe understand why at the end of the day all of us expect to see something else beyond the standard model. And this has to do with, for instance, looking at the quantum effect on the X potential in the standard model. Right? So that's the classical potential that you write in your standard model Lagrangian to break the electric symmetry, to make sure that the origin is tachyonic, that there is a local maximum at the origin. But the question now is, what is the quantum correction to those parameters, right? Lambda and the quantum correction, let's say, to V, right? This is only classical level, right? Now you are grown up, you want to do some loop computation. Right? So what are the loop computation? Let's say, so lambda is the X quartic interaction. So this is a classical potential. So now I should write some dash line for the X, right? And I want to look at all possible one loop quantum correction to this interaction. Okay? So that will be classical level plus what are the loop quantum correction that will affect the XF interaction. No? Well, you're all tired. It's the 4th lecture. Right? So, okay. Yeah, but that's not interesting. Actually, this one is not interesting. No, this one is interesting. So forgot. I should look at my notes, otherwise I will. I'm tired too. My beautiful diagrams. So, yes. That should be the same. I'm used to see it in the other direction. So that's why. What about interaction with a gauge boson? Yes. So for instance, like this, you can have interaction with a gauge boson like this, right? Interaction with a quark also, right? Up. Okay, so all of these diagrams are actually logarithmically divergent, and they will give a running to the quartic interaction. So it's logarithmically divergent because here I have two propagator of a scalar field, so it's 1 over p squared, 1 over p squared. Here it's a contact interaction, so it's just a constant. So at the end it's d4p divided by 1 over p to the 4th. So this is logarithmically divergent. So this you absorb the logarithmic divergence into a running of the x quartic coupling. Right? It's just renormalization. So here is the same thing: is 1 over p, 1 over p, 1 over p, 1 over p. Right? So this is again logarithmically divergent. So what about here? So we have 4 propagator of a scalar or spin 1. So it's again 1 over p squared to the 4th. Here you have the gauge coupling, g squared, but you're looking at an interaction with 1 gauge boson and 2 scalar field. Right? And this is actually what? This is d mu phi. No, this is 1 d mu phi times w, right? Coming from the covariant kinetic term of a scalar field. So this means that this interaction also involves 1 derivative, right? So it will be proportional to p. And now it should be p to the 4th, right? So again, you have what? d4p, 1 over p to the 8 and p to the 4th. So again, this is logarithmically divergent. Okay, so these are the diagrams that contribute to the running of the quartic interaction. Okay.
Why are there 4 scalar propagators in that?
Well, here is 1 gauge boson, which is also 1 over p squared. This is a scalar, 1 over p squared. And the difference is between fermion and boson, right? Boson is 1 over p squared, fermion is 1 over p. Right? So you can compute those diagrams. I mean, fortunately, people have computed them for you, right? And you get the one loop renormalization group evolution of lambda with the energy. And what is this expression? This beautiful expression is 16 pi squared d lambda over d log q, or d log energy, is 24 lambda squared. This is proportional to lambda squared, right? You have a piece that should be proportional to the gauge coupling 4 to the 4th power. This is 3/8 g prime 4 plus 3/4 g squared g prime squared plus 9 over 8 g to the 4th. And there is a piece here which is proportional to the 4th power of the Yukawa. So this is 6 minus 6 y top to the 4. And there is also another piece that actually mixed lambda with g squared. Okay, I'm not writing it here, it doesn't matter. So the important thing is this extra minus sign, right, coming from the loop of a fermion. You have all learned in quantum mechanics that when you have a loop of fermion, there is an extra minus sign compared to the loop of the boson, right? So that's this extra minus sign here. So now, 4w, but this this is not logarithmically divergent, right? Because 2w1x is just gauge coupling, but there is no derivative. No, what I'm saying here, yes. No, you want to look at this 1x boson, 2w's. Right? But this is just, if you remember the coupling, is just the mass squared divided by v times eta mu nu, right? There is no derivative here. In order to get the derivative, you need to keep the second scalar, only 1 gauge boson. So you replace 1 gauge boson by a momentum, basically. Okay, so now what I want to do is simply solve this equation. So to know exactly what is the shape of the X potential when I increase the energy. Right? What is the behavior of the X potential at high energy? Okay, so I'm not going to do it. I mean, it's rather simple at the end of the day. So there is at least two limits that you can solve very easily analytically, and the other you need to open. Yes. The bubble diagram. Which? Yes. That's okay. You're saying this one. Yeah, this probably exists. Yes, you're right. Where is my? Yeah, it should exist. Should be added and should be included here, I guess. Okay. So yeah, there are at least two limits where you can solve very easily those equations. The first limit is AVX mass. X mass. So mh, is 2 mh squared is 2 lambda v squared. So AVX means large value of lambda, right? So how large it is? Well, it means simply that I want to keep this term, the X self interaction should be the dominant piece on the right hand side of this RGE equation. Okay? So in this case, you have a very simple differential equation, which is 16 pi squared d lambda over d log q, or d log mu, is equal to 24 lambda squared. Right? So you can really integrate easily this equation. You will get this shape. Right? Okay. The energy, lambda. You start here, let's say, at the weak scale, so this is just related to the mass of the X. This is mh divided by 2 v squared. For v is equal 246 GeV. Right? And then there will be a value at which lambda becomes infinite. Right? Well, I mean, there is a sort of instability. You start with lambda, which is large, then the derivative is positive, so the evolution with the energy will increase, will make it even bigger. And actually, it's a dramatic increase. At some point, you will have a Landau pole, so lambda becomes infinite at finite energy. So you can easily actually compute the value of this Landau pole, this energy at which it becomes infinite, and this is V exponential 4 pi v squared divided by 3 mh squared. Right? And of course, this is something which is not acceptable, right? So you cannot have an energy, a coupling that becomes infinite, the theory becomes non-perturbative, doesn't make sense anymore. So you need to introduce new physics before you are reaching this Landau pole. Right? So this means that in the limit of large X mass, you expect new physics at a scale lambda, which is smaller than the Landau pole of this theory. Right. So that's the maximum value at which you can extend the standard model if the X mass is large. Right? You can repeat the same exercise, look at the other limit, which is the small X mass. So in this case, I can neglect lambda, I can neglect the mixed term lambda g squared. G is smaller than the top Yukawa, so at the end of the day, you need to solve this equation, which is 16 pi squared d lambda over d log mu is equal to minus 6 y top to the fourth, right? So now you cannot directly solve it because you still don't know exactly what is the evolution of the top Yukawa with the energy. So you need to compute another thing, which is the one loop correction to the top Yukawa. So top x, right? So this is a tree-level diagram. So now, for instance, you can attach an extra x. So this is a one-loop correction. This will give you the RGE equation for the top coupling. So it's a complicated system of two differential couple equation of differential equation. 16. No, where is it? dy top over d log mu is equal to 9 over 2 y top cube, right? Y top cube because you have 1, 2, 3 power of the Yukawa, right? So you can solve this system. I mean, again, you can do it on a piece of paper, right? And what you found this time is that, okay, you start with the same point here. It will become 0 or negative as some finite value of the energy. So you find an instability again. You start with lambda, which is small. The evolution with the energy, because of this minus sign, will make it even smaller, right? So there is another instability. So this time, lambda becomes negative at an energy which is okay, v exponential 4 pi squared mh squared. So now the mass of the x is in the numerator, 3 y top to the 4 v squared. Okay. Nobody can read it. That doesn't matter. So again, this is something which is not acceptable, right? Lambda being negative means that the x potential will go to infinity. So this is the x potential, right? So you arrange everything in the electric vacuum, but suddenly there is a new minimum appearing. This new minimum is pushed to infinity. Right? So this cannot describe our universe, right? The electric vacuum will tunnel into the true vacuum of the potential. We will all die, right? By this tunneling effect. Of course, you can compute the tunneling time, and in the standard model, you are quite safe. I mean, but this is a problem for the universe, not for us, but for the universe. So again, it means that there should be new physics at a scale lambda. So lambda should be smaller than this instability point. Right? So now, of course, you are asking me the numerical value. So what are the constraints now? I mean, I need to put numbers. Where do we sit exactly here? You can plot what lambda, so the cutoff scale of the standard model, the mass of the x. There is this triviality bound, so that is what is happening, if the mass of the x is large. So this is called the triviality bound. This is the stability bound. So here the universe, the electric vacuum becomes unstable. And there is only this tiny region where you can extend it to very high energy. And in particular, if you want to put the Planck scale here, 10 to the 19 GeV, what are the value of the X mass, which are allowed, is 130 GeV, 180 GeV. Right? So the bad news for you is that we are living in this metastability, unstable region. Actually, it's metastable. It means that actually, if you compute the tunneling time, is much larger than the age of the universe. So that's why we are safe, but okay, still bad news. Yeah, so instability here, and there is this metastability, and if you plot 125 GeV here, which is what is measured at the LHE, we are here, right, between instability, so this is called the metastability. So we can live long enough. Okay. So of course, this is a three-level analysis. People have repeated this analysis at two-loop, three-loop. I mean, adding all possible uncertainty on the value of the top quark mass, on the value of the X mass, because these are the two important parameters, that control this stability and instability. So you need to measure with high precision the top mass. You need to measure with high precision the X mass to know exactly where we are. If we are closer to this region, closer to this one, etc., etc. Yes, do this computation, repeat the computation in 2x doublet model, in MSSM, whatever. I don't know. There is a big, actually for me, there is a big theoretical uncertainty that you have no control on, is actually what is a threshold correction at the Planck scale. You know, you're assuming that you can extend the standard model, but at some point you need to quantize gravity. So there will be some quantum gravitational effect. You need to know exactly the structure of the quantum theory at the Planck scale to be able to really compute all the threshold effect that you have no effect, that you have no clue about. What are the effect on this, or I don't know. So there will be, actually to me, these lines are precisely computed, but they come with a big uncertainty due to the fact that we don't know quantum gravity. Yes?
Sorry, what's your choice of lambda here?
Lambda. Here?
Yeah.
Well, here I'm plotting the two extremal conditions. So this is lambda Landau pole, right? So that was a function of on mh and m top, if you want. So here, I don't know, I fix the mass of the top. We can discuss at length. I mean, what is the value of the mass of the top you should use? This is the pole mass, the ms bar mass. All these things have been discussed. I cannot understand anything, but they have been discussed. Right? And so this is the Landau pole, and the second line was the stability region. Right? Okay, I mean, for instance, for the Landau pole, you know, you can worry about the fact that here I've done only a one-loop computation, right? And if lambda becomes large, I mean, you need to resum all the loop correction in power of lambda, right? But this has been done. You need lattice to do that. Again, this has been taken care of. Right? But anyway, it's not so relevant in nature because at the end of the day, we are very far away from this bound. So what is more worrisome is about the stability or metastability. Okay, is there any questions there? No. Yes?
Just because I'm curious, what would happen if the X would change to the instability region?
If
Happen to the universe?
or if you decay, well, you will form a bubble. The bubble will expand at the speed of light and it will eat all the universe. And, no, you can compute this thing. I mean, this beautiful lecture by Coleman. And these things are known. Okay. But, I mean, even today, you know, there, I mean, maybe not today, but 2 days ago, 3 days ago, there is papers really computing this tunneling lifetime for the standard model, you know, is 10 to the 532 years, plus or minus something in the exponential. So there is a big uncertainty only in the standard model. And in addition to that, and that's why I have some suspicions about the relevance of this computation, you don't know exactly, you know, the threshold correction at the Planck scale. And that's a big, big theoretical uncertainty. Okay. Good. So I have 5 minutes left to reach the homework exercise, which is about the hierarchy problem. Right? So far we have been discussing the quantum correction to the X quartic coupling, but there is also this famous quantum correction to the mass of the X, to the quadratic piece. Right? So is lambda h to the 4th plus, let's say, minus m squared h squared, right? Okay. Expand it plus a constant, right? So what are the corrections to the X mass? Right? So this is a 3-level X mass, again, which is related to lambda and V, I don't care. And now there is this loop correction, right? These are the dominant diagram that contribute to the correction to the X mass. So now we should do power counting. So, okay, here I have one momentum, one propagator. So it's d4p, 1 over p squared. This is divergent integral with a power law. It's proportional to lambda squared if lambda is the maximum energy of the particle running into the loop. This is also 1 over p squared, d4p, so this is also lambda squared. Here you have two propagators of a fermion, so it's 1 over p squared, d4p, so it's also quadratically divergent. So this is usually what you see in the book. Now you can compute those diagrams. For instance, you choose a gauge, RC gauge, right? For instance, I don't want to do the computation in the unitary gauge, just to make sure at the end of the day that the result is gauge invariant, right? Any observable should be gauge invariant. So if these corrections are physical, they should also be gauge invariant. So let us do that in RC gauge, right? So you can here include the propagator of the gauge boson in RC gauge, which are complicated. Probably you remember that better than me, right? The propagator is just eta mu nu minus 1 over minus psi p mu p nu divided by p squared minus m squared times psi, and then it's just 1 over p squared minus m squared, right? So what I'm worried about is the dependence on psi, and this you can compute. If you compute those diagrams explicitly, you will find a gauge-dependent result, right? Okay, let's look only at these diagrams. So this diagram alone, for instance, this gauge-dependent diagram is giving you delta m squared, the mass of the X, is 3 times 3 minus psi divided by 64 pi squared and g squared times lambda squared. Right? You have a result, a correction to the X mass, which is gauge dependent. Right? Nobody is talking about that in any books. I haven't found this discussion in any books. So maybe, you know, the people that believe that there is no hierarchy problem will tell you, well, this is a gauge-dependent result, so clearly it's not physical, what you're computing doesn't make any sense. Well, actually, there is a fourth diagram that also contribute to the X mass, a diagram which is never shown in the books, but that exists, that also give you a quadratically divergent contribution to the X mass, which is also gauge-independent, and that's a diagram that involves. What is this fourth diagram? Goldstone boson, yes. I was expecting you to tell me about the ghost, but no. This is a Goldstone boson. Yeah. The ghost don't give you any contribution. I think I want to tell you because it's puzzling, no? So you have here the X, you have the ghost, so I don't know how to draw the ghost, maybe double line. So you have indeed a contribution like that involves the ghost, but this is no quadratically divergent simply because the propagator of the ghost is what? Is 1 over k squared or p squared, I don't know, minus psi, the mass of the ghost. This is 1 over scalar, so it's 1 over p squared minus m squared. And here the vertex between the gauge boson, the scalar and the ghost is simply what? G times m times psi, right? So this is a finite diagrams. The ghosts don't give you any quadratically divergent contribution. So the result, as you say, is the Goldstone boson. So you have diagrams here with a W, and then this is a Goldstone. So I don't know. I'm running out of notation, so this is a Goldstone, a GA. It's not a gluon. Okay. And this is quadratically divergent. You can compute these diagrams, and this will exactly kill this psi dependence here. Right. So the result, at the end of the day, is indeed gauge, well, at least gauge independent. Right? I haven't shown that it's gauge invariant, but it's gauge independent. Doesn't depend on the value of the psi parameter. So that gives you at least the first confidence that you are dealing really with a physical quantity, right? And we have all heard the bell ringing, so don't have much time to finish. I won't compute those diagrams for you. I will just give you the result. You can compute. Delta mh squared is 3 lambda squared divided by 16 pi squared v squared twice the mass of the W plus the mass of the Z squared plus the mass of the X squared minus 4 n top squared. Right? So that's the quantum correction to the mass of the X. And now you're in trouble, right? Because you want this not to be much larger than the observed value of the X mass. Right? So you would like this to be at most, let's say, 100 GeV or 125 GeV or whatever. Right? So you know those quantity, right? So this means that lambda cannot be too large. So you expect new physics at a relatively low energy for the correction to be compatible with what you observe. If those corrections are too large, maybe it's not a problem, right? You need to adjust the classical mass of the X. I mean, at the end of the day, what you observe physically, is the sum of the X mass classical level. I mean, you are doing renormalization, right? All the time you find infinite result, right? So you're summing the classical value plus the quantum correction, right? And this has to be 125 GeV, right? Square. So, okay, this is very large. This is finite, so this has to be very large and negative, okay? But it just means that you don't understand what you are doing, right? You need to introduce a very large number that cancel with each other for no good reason. At the end of the day, you get a finite result which is very compatible with what you observe. So this means that most likely there will be some deep reason why there is this cancellation between a UV quantity, an infrared quantity, a classical potential, etc. So you are missing something, right? You're missing why this cancellation is taking place. And this is called the hierarchy problem, right? So you want to, for instance, you could introduce new physics to exactly cancel those quadratic divergence. That's what is achieved in supersymmetry. In supersymmetry, you introduce new particles, the quarks, or the Xenos, or the gauginos, to exactly cancel each of those terms here. You can go into composite X model. What is in composite X model? Well, composite X, above a certain scale, the Higgs boson doesn't exist anymore. And you see the fundamental constituent. So this means that the maximum energy here will be the compositeness scale of the Higgs boson. There is nothing else above this compositeness scale. There is thousands of other models that is addressing the hierarchy problem. We're trying to make sense of this quantum correction. Which one is correct? We have no clue. Right? And this will be your job to find it. So this is your final homework. You have 40 or 50 years to find the solution. And if you don't find it, go and give lectures and ask the student to find it. Okay, thanks.